In the first week of release, Running Free charted, an amazing feat for a heavy metal record, and one which prompted the BBC to offer the band a slot on Top of the Pops. Rod nearly had apoplexy. His band on a plastic show like that, never. But never isn't always forever, and Rod finally agreed, but only on the understanding they did it live. The BBC agreed, although it had been 8 years since a similar performance by The Who. It was the first time Top of the Pops had had a heavy metal band on with their first single record, and in the first week of release. Almost immediately, Maiden began recording their first album with Will Malone at Kingsway Studios in London. To promote the forthcoming album, Maiden supported the Judas Priest UK tour, and when it wound up in Birmingham at the end of March, it proved to be the last time Iron Maiden would support anybody in the UK. The album, eponymously called Iron Maiden, was released on April 11th and went straight to number 4, going silver with over 60,000 sales. Maiden had arrived. 1980 was a career turning point for Iron Maiden. Almost immediately after the Priest tour finished, they set off on their own first major headline tour, 42 dates, including a sellout at the Rainbow Finsbury Park. Maiden released a new single to promote the tour. It was an old Steve Harris classic that had originally been lost on the Muthas album. It was the artwork that caused a storm, in the shape of our old friend Eddie.
We named the company after a Maiden song, Sanctuary, which became a hit single in 1980, and depicted the slaughter of the Iron Maiden at the time, Maggie Thatcher, quite appropriately.
Sanctuary! Out of the winter came a frost. Never killed a woman before, never died. Yeah. I know you don't gotta say it, it's all I saw. Now I've got to look for sanctuary for the Lord, yeah. Come on, scream for me, no sound!
The cover of the Sanctuary single depicting Eddie finishing off Thatcher for apparently tearing down a Maiden tour poster set the good and the great tearing their hair out. The Daily Mirror went to town on it, and EMI were forced to put a black line through Thatcher's eyes. If this was censorship, it didn't make a jot of difference, since the massive publicity had already done the job. The Maiden had taken on the lady, and West Ham had won the cup final. What a month! And it didn't stop there.
The first really big gig we did was probably Reading Festival in August 1980, when we were a special guest to UFO in front of about 30,000 people. And it was a great time as the band, we'd released the first album, which debuted at number 4 after we toured with Judas Priest. And that was sort of the culmination in Britain of a great year for the band, playing to that many people and having, a tremendous reaction.
It was Europe's chance to get turned on to Maiden. In August, they embarked on the KISS tour as their special guests and hit Italy, Switzerland, Norway, France, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Holland, and Belgium. It was tough going for the band because whereas Kiss could jet from place to place, Maiden were doing it the hard way, on the road. Exhausted or not, they gave Kiss a good run for their money, to the extent that Gene Simmons even blagged one of their t-shirts with the excuse that, quote, "If I had one with the name of the group that's going straight to the top, I wouldn't mind." On their return to the UK, Dennis Stratton quit due to good old musical differences. To replace him came an old mate of Davies from a band called Urchin, Adrian H. Smith. Before recording a new album, the band took out the new lineup on a warm-up tour of 12 gigs. To coincide with it, they needed a new single. They were persuaded by their publisher to cover an Australian single called Women in Uniform, and the cover showed Maggie with a gun, waiting to get her revenge on Eddie, who has his arms wrapped around a couple of top-heavy nurses. Ever after, the group were to refer to this track as NAF. The record peaked at 35, resulting in an indifferent Top of the Pops performance due to studio difficulties. But the band made a promo video, becoming only the second rock outfit after Queen to predate the MTV era. Now Iron Maiden secured the services of Deep Purple's producer Martin Birch, and after a spell in Battery Studios, Killers was released in February 1981. After the amazing success of 1980, perhaps it was inevitable there would be an anticlimax. That came in the form of an unfavorable critique in Sounds and the hypothesis that Maiden might have lost it. If anybody really thought that, all they had to do was go and see the Killers World Tour, which covered 15 countries, including Japan and the USA.
Thinking of a major dream, place I have never seen. Fancy the time before, split right now through the fall. On the clock of my ride, over now I can't think why, but I try to leave my soul. Into me I just don't know. No rising from the past, future shadows overcast. Some country at my head, through the darkness I relate.
When Iron Maiden started the American leg of the Killers tour, they knew they had a job to do. America is never the easiest market to crack, especially as the band and Rod knew they couldn't rely on airplay. To do that, you have to have an easy listening hit along the lines of Toto or Foreigner. This was something Maiden refused to compromise on, regardless of the instant success that airtime delivered. No one says it better than Davey.
It would have been nice if we had more, but you know, we've kind of done things on our own terms. You know, we haven't had to make a song, you know, just for radio, which will sell the albums. I think the albums tend to sell themselves, you know, from the fans, and us not actually selling out or becoming commercial, you know. And I think in that way we kind of stuck by our guns, and I think possibly that's why we've been able to stick around for so long, because we haven't actually sold out and followed trends and become commercial. We've just stuck by what we believe in and what we love doing, you know.
Wrathchild was another track off the new album, an album which justified Maiden's tough stance on their music in the USA. Sales of Killers topped 200,000, and it cracked the top 100 Billboard chart. America had its first taste of Iron Maiden, and Steve Harris had his first taste of America.
The first gig we played in the States was in Vegas, and the first actual time we went to the States, we spent 5 days before that in LA, and they're both really crazy places. And so we just thought, how are we going to handle 2 months of this? It's just a crazy place.
You walk through the subway, he's like burn a hole in your
But it's a great place to tour, and it's 24 hours of everything you want, you know, when you're on the road. And it was exciting because it was playing to a totally different kind of audience. We'd had a little taste of it in the early days because we played in US Air Force bases in the UK, and seen how, you know, how crazy some of the Americans could be. But in some depends on the place where you go in the States. I mean, some areas are really crazy and other areas can be quite sort of conservative. So it was quite a challenge to win the audience over, and also if they've not really heard much about you, they tend to just stand in with a sort of folded arms attitude. And we just went out and really attacked the audience from sort of gig one right over the monitors, right in their face. And I think they were shocked that a band would go out and actually be right in their face like that. So it was exciting and a challenge.
The challenge certainly paid off, with the album going gold in many of the other countries Maiden hit on that tour, especially Japan, where their success led to the release of an EP imaginatively titled Maiden Japan. If there was one problem with the tour, however, it was Paul Di'Anno's voice, or rather lack of one. Paul, being no shrinking violet and a lover of all the good things of life, namely booze, cigarettes and late nights, had lost his voice, which meant gigs had to be cancelled. A parting of the ways was inevitable, and Maiden looked elsewhere for a replacement. The lead singer with the group, Samson, still sporting ex-Maiden Thunderstick, was the engagingly named Bruce Bruce. Real name Bruce Dickinson. He was an interesting character whose roots were far removed from London's East End. Harry didn't see this as a problem.
It didn't really make any difference. I mean, because he'd actually gone to university or college or whatever in Mile End, so you know, it didn't really have any bearing on the way we got on with him or anything like that. A lot of press made a big deal out of it, you know, that he was, you know, ex-public schoolboy and all this kind of stuff. But it didn't really make any difference to us. I mean, he didn't sort of try and come across as being anything different or better than the rest of us. So we just treated him normally and so on.
Education be damned, it was his voice the band wanted, and in September 1981 Bruce Dickinson joined Iron Maiden. Within a few warm-up gigs he'd made his mark with the fans, being christened the Air Raid Siren on account of his unearthly screams. That power was evident on his first single release with the band in March 1982.